Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 16th of April, and this is Govindraj Ethiraj broadcasting and streaming from Mumbai, India's financial capital. Our top stories and themes for the day: the stock markets tank on increased tensions in the Middle East, but now poised to recover. India will outperform Japan and China as the most compelling 12-month investment case, says a Bloomberg fund manager survey. Above normal rainfall for the first time in 8 years, says the Met Department's monsoon projection. And the BJP and the Congress put out their manifestos, looking at them through an economic lens.
This is a core report with Govindraj Ethiraj.
The markets lose ground, but now poised to recover. It was a tough day in the markets as they lost ground on Monday thanks to increased tensions in the Middle East, with Israel and Iran faced off against each other and world powers scrambling to contain an Israeli retaliation to Iran's firing some 200 missiles and drones into Israel, which in turn was a response to Israel bombing an Iranian embassy in Syria. The BSE, of course, had fallen on Friday as well, and on Monday it fell to 845 points, or about 1.1%, to end at 73,400, while the Nifty 50 closed at 22,273, down 247 points. If you remember, it was only a few days ago that we were celebrating 75,000 of the Sensex. 27 of the 30 Sensex stocks and 44 of the 50 Nifty stocks posted losses on Monday, and the BSE mid-cap and small-cap indices also fell about 1.5% each. The rupee too took a hit, closed at its lowest against the US dollar at 83 rupees 45 paise. Elsewhere, gold prices, which have been rising, are steady for the moment. Well-known investor Jim Rogers told Business Standard that he owns oil and gold, not because of war, but because he sees shortages developing of crude oil across the world. Gold prices, on the other hand, have been depressed since quite some time now, he said, and has started moving up again. Geopolitical worries will lead to higher gold prices, so he says that he's not selling gold, but if he had to buy something today, he would buy silver. Silver prices have dropped a lot from its all-time high, and that said, he said he holds silver too. India to outperform China and Japan, Bloomberg survey. India's ability to convert economic expansion into corporate profits makes it a better prospect for investors than Japan or China, according to the latest Bloomberg Markets Live Pulse survey. Even with China's attractively low stock valuations and Japan's progress in improving corporate governance, almost half of the 390 MLiv Pulse survey respondents selected India as the best investment amongst three Asian giants. Kieran Calder, head of equity research for Asia at Union Bancaire Privée in Singapore, told Bloomberg that there are many reasons to prefer expensive India equities over cheap China ones, such as better transmission of GDP growth into earnings growth. He said that a better track record of delivering consistent earnings growth and supportive geopolitical environments help, or rather further bolster the case for Indian stocks. Incidentally, and perhaps interestingly, Indian stocks are now trading at about 23 times next year's expected earnings, exceeding even the United States and outpacing the 17 for Japan and about 9 for India, according to data compiled by Bloomberg based on MSCI Inc.'s indices. More than half the survey respondents said they expected China's equity market to underperform India and Japan over the next 12 months. Bloomberg data pointed out that Indian equities have attracted about $25 billion in net inflows for the year through March, compared with just $5.3 billion for China, something that we've been pointing out on the core report as well. Indian shares now make up about 18% of the MSCI Emerging Markets Index, and China's 25% weighting is down from its high of more than 40% a few years ago. Some 41% of the respondents felt that infrastructure in India was a particular bright spot. And the government, of course, that's in India, has more than tripled its infrastructure allocation from 5 years ago to more than $132 billion for the 25 fiscal year. Good monsoons are here. From good news in the markets to good news in the weather, the Indian Meteorological Department has said that in its first long-range forecast for the year that the southwest monsoon, which runs from June to September, will be above normal this year. Now, this is the first time in 8 years that the IMD has forecasted above normal rainfall, which is 104 to 110% of long period average or LPA. Interestingly, in 2022, India did see above normal rainfall, while last year it was normal at about 94%. Bank of Baroda research said that expectations of normal monsoons bodes well for the agriculture sector and should keep farmers happy, and will also keep a check on food prices, or rather ought to keep a check on food prices. In terms of spatial distribution, regions such as northwest, eastern and northeastern regions of India are expected to witness below normal rainfall, while other regions continue to record above normal rainfall across the country. So the IMD's forecast of above normal rainfall comes on the heels of other forecasts of extreme heat wave conditions going on in the country right now. BOB research also pointed out that water reservoir levels have been lower at 33% of their total capacity compared to 39% reservoir levels noted last year as of 12th April. On weather conditions, IMD said that they expect El Nino conditions moderating over the equatorial Pacific region, with certain agencies forecasting a possible fading of these conditions and turning to neutral, that's El Nino Southern Oscillation or ENSO conditions. In the latter half of the southwest monsoon, that's August to September, there is a possibility of the formation of La Nina conditions. Now, the La Nina means that there will be a cooling in the sea surface temperature and they contribute to higher rainfall. So the La Nina is in some ways the opposite of El Nino, which means that it is not good rainfall or not good conditions for rainfall. Citing data from 1951 to 2023, the chief of the Indian Meteorological Department said it shows India experienced above normal monsoon rainfall only on 9 occasions when La Nina followed El Nino events. Manifestos, do they matter and how? Elections start rolling later this week on the 19th, and the leading parties, that's the Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP and the Congress, have put out their manifestos which outline their vision and commitments for the next 5 years. The Congress manifesto is called Nyay Patra and the BJP is called Sankalp Patra, with the Modi Ki Guarantee slogan. Now, both manifestos have a fair bit in common, including a focus on women, farmers, support for farmers, education, infrastructure, health, national security, and youth, in not necessarily that order. The approach of each party, of course, to these issues could be a little different. The BJP has said it guarantees India will become the third largest economic power, commits to low inflation and economic growth, and increasing job opportunities and supporting taxpayers, amongst others. The Congress has said it will double GDP in the next 10 years, enact laws to protect gig and unorganized workers, and support free trade and rule-based international commerce. Very broadly, many of the other promises that involve expenditures will not come through if the economy does not do well. So let's stay on that point and going by the track record of the BJP as we know it and what it might change if so. To discuss this and to understand the larger contours of manifesto making and delivery, I reached out to Ashok Bhattacharya, editorial director and columnist at Business Standard, and I began by asking him first, looking at history, if manifestos mattered and whether parties could be held to account on them.
If you look at past manifestos, and if you look at the 2014 manifesto of BJP and 2019 manifesto of BJP again, and also if you look at 2009 manifesto of the Congress, you will see that not all the promises are fulfilled, but the major ones, the key ones are certainly fulfilled by the party that comes to power after the elections. So to your question, and whether they matter or not, I think they do matter, but they matter for another good reason, which is that you get to know that what is the political or the economic intent of the party which is seeking your votes. So that is something more important than whether they fulfill it. Of course, they would like to fulfill it, but there may be various factors for which you cannot fulfill all the promises. But some promises, the major ones I've seen, take the BJP's promise of Article 370 or the Citizenship Amendment Act, the law of giving incentives which is linked to production, production incentive. These are all electoral promises made by the BJP and they were fulfilled. Similarly, right to information, the right to jobs, right to education, all these were electoral promises of the Congress, and they were fulfilled by them. So it's an important indicator, but whether you can hold them accountable, I think it's a function of democracy and how strong is your democracy.
So now, before I come to the economic part, in general, between some of the points that you made, for example, on some of the political promises that the BJP made in the two, or rather ahead of the two previous elections, would you say that the economic promises or commitments in manifesto enjoy the same level of, let's say, priority compared to other, maybe more social issues? Or are you?
For BJP, the political manifesto is more important to the BJP than the economic promises that they make in the manifesto. In the case of the Congress, it was more on socio-economic issues that they were very strong on. I mean, BJP has fulfilled more of its political promises. I would say that its economic promises are there, but I think the priority is always on political promises.
Right. So if I look at the two now, and BJP and Congress once again, there is, of course, a focus which is a little maybe higher on women, farmers, support for them, education, infrastructure, health, national security, and youth, not necessarily in that order. But if we look at economic now, the BJP, for example, talks about guaranteeing India becoming the third largest economic power, low inflation, economic growth, more job opportunities, supporting taxpayers. And Congress says it will double GDP in the next 10 years, enact laws to protect gig and unorganized workers, support free trade, rule based international commerce. So, except for one or two things which seem to stand away, like let's say the Congress focus on rule based international commerce or free trade, the rest seems to be more or less flowing along the same lines. Is that only to be expected?
You are right. More or less, they follow the same lines. And manifesto reading, in my view, is more the art of looking at what are the instruments are going to be used to fulfill those promises. And when you look at those instruments, which are also included in the manifestos, I find that both the Congress and the BJP manifestos are something that are very, very interesting for anybody who's watching India's political economy. I mean, take, for example, BJP's focus on becoming the global hubs for as many as 12 or 13 sectors, whether it is a shipbuilding, whether food processing, defense, railways, aviation, electronics, chips, electric vehicles. These are all the areas where you want to be the global hubs. And the focus is how to get more investments. But if you look at what needs to be done to secure those investments, presumably from the private sector, the manifesto is by and large silent. So therefore, what you are seeing is that there is no mention whether there will be more free trade agreements or whether your trade policy will undergo a change or whether the labor reforms will be expedited, because even though you have passed the labor laws, you have not notified them. Therefore, it is making a promise, but it is not telling the voters that what needs to be done to achieve that goal. But in stark contrast, there are some promises that the BJP makes. For example, BJP makes this promise of granting fiscal autonomy to the third tier of governance, which is Panchayati Raj institution. Now, that to my mind is a promise that tells you about what the BJP government, when it comes to power, if it comes to power, how will it really look at the third tier of governance? And that to my mind is something that is possible because the Finance Commission brief is very clear on this. So if the government wishes that let the fiscal autonomy issue be tackled as far as Panchayati Raj institution is concerned, to my mind, that will be a big change because it will bring about a major change in the ecosystem of the country. So I think that's a promise which I find very, very interesting. Similarly, there is something in the BJP manifesto about the need to strengthen statistical institutions. Now, this is once again an economic promise, but it is arising from the overall sense of doubt and questions over India's data collection methodologies. So I find some of these promises which reflect the concerns that are being expressed in various quarters, and the manifesto seems addressed them. And if you look at the Congress manifesto, you will see that the Congress manifesto is more on a kind of social justice to be delivered through economic instruments. I mean, whether it is a question of reservation of jobs to be raised above 50%, or whether it is a question of 10% of economically weaker section of the reservation will be given across all communities, castes, and religions, whether it will be a land redistribution policy, apprenticeship act. So these are all social justice oriented economic policy promises. Whereas the BJP is going in for big investment, but no promise of land, labor, agricultural reform laws. But it is giving you a sense of overall structural change, particularly in the question of how it wants to see the third tier of governance.
Right. And if you look at the BJP manifesto, is it also in some ways leaning on continuity? And you talked about those 12 industries, for example. Now, that seems to be in keeping with what it's already doing. It's saying that we are going to focus on electric vehicles and renewables and a manufacturing ecosystem driven by, let's say, incentives, for example, in the case of semiconductors. So could it be the case that BJP says, okay, this is already something that you see in ahead of you. So all we're doing in the manifesto is to maybe reiterate what is already in progress?
Absolutely. I think it's a ruling party manifesto. So there will be continuity. And to that extent, you can see that the leadership has a clear idea of what it wants to achieve. It wants to go the investment path for ensuring growth, not necessarily at this point in time the consumption path. So that's a very, very important distinction that the BJP manifesto makes, that it once again is reiterating on how India can achieve its growth targets through investments. But along with that, it's also focused on some key critical issues on judicial reforms with that. And that, to my mind, is a very important promise it makes, the BJP. And since it is a ruling party, we should probably look at it as a party that wants to come back to power and ensure growth through better judicial administration, talking about e-courts, talking about resolution of old disputes through an alternate mechanism. There's also a talk about capacity building among government employees, promise of commercial and civil law reforms. Now, you already have moved to a point, but I think there is a lot more to be done. The number of cases that are pending in the lower and the higher courts is huge. So I think you need that judicial reforms. There is a hint of it in the Congress manifesto also. I found that the BJP manifesto is far more pointed and sharp in these areas. The only one sharp comment that the Congress manifesto makes is when it talks about shifting many items in the concurrent list to the state list. Now, that's a clear message that if the Congress comes to power, then it will review the large number of items in the 7th schedule of the Constitution, which are right now in the concurrent list, which means both the center and the states can frame laws there. Now, they will be pushed to the state list, which means the state will have a final authority to frame laws there. For example, take the instance of agriculture, take the case of land, take the case of labor. They are all in the concurrent list. Now, it's very clear that if the Congress comes to power, it will like to review that arrangement and say a constitutional reform bill to be introduced by which many of these items, very contentious items, the farm law reforms issues, land labor law reform issues, they could be pushed to the state list, making it easier or maybe pushing the reform agenda to the states.
So both parties seem to have an ambitious growth target. The third largest economy target is already known. It's not new in itself. The Congress is saying it wants to double GDP. But if you were to take a step back, one is, are these targets reasonable? That's one. But that also is not, I guess, such an important question. But in order to achieve all of this, and I'm talking purely from an economic point of view now, what perhaps is missing in these manifestos, particularly the BJP one, in your understanding?
Not enough attention has been paid to two critical sectors of health and education. There are sections on reforms on health and education, but certainly if you want to achieve higher growth and more jobs, which both the manifestos of both Congress and BJP talk about jobs and jobs and jobs with investment, etc. But unless you improve the health delivery mechanisms and unless you improve the education sector, and make it capable of producing employable graduates, the goal of achieving higher growth will face a lot of roadblocks and hurdles.
Right. AKB, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tesla slashes workforce globally, searches for showrooms in India. Since it's Tesla, even news of a search for showroom space in Mumbai and Delhi, usually a matter involving local real estate brokers, is news. Because obviously it means that Tesla will start selling its cars, which in itself is not such a big step because it will now be able to import them at sharply reduced or 15% duty rates, which is what it wanted in the first place, and the policy has been tailored for it. Current import duties could go up to 100%, but exceptions are now being made for companies promising to set up domestic manufacturing, in this case in electric vehicles. Meanwhile, the headline news is that Tesla will reduce global headcount by more than 10%, according to Bloomberg, quoting CEO Elon Musk, saying that there was a duplication of roles and job functions in certain areas. Some 14,000 jobs are set to go in Tesla. Bloomberg also reported that Tesla reported disastrous vehicle deliveries early this month, missing expectations by a wide margin and posting its first quarterly decline in 4 years. Several analysts are bracing for Tesla sales to potentially shrink for the year, citing slow output of its newest model, the Cybertruck, and a lull in new products until the company starts producing a next-generation vehicle next year. And meanwhile, in India, the showrooms will hopefully open by then. That was the Core Report with me, Govindraj Ethiraj. Do stay connected with more of our coverage at the Core. You can check out our website or sign up to our newsletter for our exclusive stories, one in-depth feature a day on www.thecore.in. Do also track us on LinkedIn, where we usually post synopses or extracts of our top stories and interviews. We would love your feedback on how we can make business more interesting and relevant, including, of course, India's vibrant manufacturing sector. So write to us at feedback@thecore.in, and thank you once again for listening.